So on behalf of Hillary McGowan, I would like to present some information about a new sub-element for our comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. This new sub-element contains policies for preserving urban tree canopy and is proposed to be added as a sub-element to the natural environment element, which we talked about at Planning Commission last month. Next slide, please. And just a quick reminder with the requisite "you are here" indicator of the briefing schedule for the comprehensive plan. Here we are talking urban tree canopy, and later on this evening, urban core sub-area plan. And as I mentioned, last month was the natural environment element as well as parks. Next slide, please, Taylor. This presentation will cover some background information, an overview of the proposal, the public input we've received so far, and there will be time for questions at the end. And as usual, you can refer to the staff report for more details. Next slide, please. This policy proposal originated with a motion from the County Council and reflects key components of state laws, notably the Evergreen Communities Act, or the ECA, and the Urban Forest Management Act, or the UFMA. Acronyms, it's planning. A bit more on these state initiatives in a minute, but first let's take a quick look at another option for the origin of this proposal. Next slide, please. So even though the data from the tree canopy monitoring report shows positive canopy statistics, there's still a desire for further protection of trees. And I suspect this is likely a community level reaction to examples like the one shown here. This is the same site before and after, or before and during, I should say. I suspect this is likely a community level reaction to examples like this. As you can see, every bit of vegetation has been removed. And recall from the previous presentation that 26 of the 49 projects in 2022 relied only on newly planted trees to meet their canopy requirements. This is one of them. What the neighbors can't see during this development process is that the landscape design and the future canopy planned for this site once the project is complete. It's difficult to reconcile the removal of the mature trees with the immediate results of a newly completed development project, given that canopy is assessed at a 20-year benchmark. So I think that occurrences like this being observed by the neighbors indicates or promotes a desire for greater tree retention than what we've been able to accomplish. So next slide, please. And here's a quick word about the importance of tree canopy. There's a long list of ecosystem services, or to use the Growth Management Act vernacular, the functions and values attributed to trees, not the least of which is contributions to human health and quality of life. Trees provide shade and air temperature moderation, improve air quality, carbon sequestration, stormwater and erosion attenuation, noise reduction, and habitat, to name a few. Next slide, please. Now I'll jump back to the Evergreen Communities Act that is a foundational component of the proposal here. The Evergreen Communities Act from 2008 is essentially a plan for coordinated management of urban forests, assistance to communities for assessment, inventory, and technical support, and designation of a community as evergreen community for those areas with an approved forest management plan. Next slide, please. And in 2021, the Evergreen Communities Act was updated with the Urban Forest Management Act to incorporate new information and analysis and increase capacity for participation in the program. Both the Evergreen Communities Act and the Urban Forest Management Act are work plan directives to be managed by the State Department of Natural Resources in coordination with local communities. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on this slide. I just want to say that the RCW at 76.15, which is the Urban Forest Management Act, identifies steps for local cities and counties to participate in Department of Natural Resources urban forestry program and to prepare a forest management plan. It also establishes criteria for obtaining designation as an evergreen community, and which would entitle the community to financial and technical support for urban forest management. Next slide, please. I do want to point out that the tree canopy subelement is not a requirement of the Growth Management Act. It is, however, supported by the environmental goals in the Growth Management Act and by the state forestry programs. Tree canopy plays a significant role in the ecological functions and values that the Growth Management Act seeks to protect. This subelement contains one goal, 6 objectives, and 30 policies, and would be a subelement in the natural environment element itself. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned in the previous presentation, we have updated our canopy data using remote sensing analysis conducted by GIS or Geographic Information Services experts in our Surface Water Management Division, looking at tree canopy coverage within our unincorporated portions of our urban growth areas. And they have calculated a tree canopy coverage of 38%. So that's where the newest and the latest and greatest number comes from, is from remote sensing analysis as shown on this map. Next slide, please. And the overarching goal of the tree canopy subelement is to provide healthy urban forests in urban unincorporated areas to support ecosystem services, public health, economic vitality, increased environmental stability and resiliency, and a better quality of life. So that is the new natural environment goal 9 for the urban tree canopy subelement. Next slide, please. And to touch on kind of a high-level overview of the subelement objectives and policies, the objectives and policies support a multifaceted approach similar to the natural environment element to look at urban forest management programs modeled after the Urban Forest Management Act, a canopy threshold goal of 38% coverage in unincorporated UGAs to include additional forested areas not already protected through other requirements in county code, things such as critical areas and shorelines and other tree retention requirements. These policies would hope to supplement that level of tree canopy protection. The policies also address inventory and assessment tools and support an equity focus as kind of a main concept from Vision 2050 and from our countywide planning policies. Next slide, please. This is a continuation. The policies also address seeking funding opportunities for program support, incentives and potential for a fee in lieu program, public education and stewardship, best management practices for managing and maintaining forests, and then finally looking at acquisition of forestry assets for continued county management. Next slide, please. And implementation considerations include budgeting and staffing for the program administration and forest maintenance. The Urban Forest Management Act requires as its first step towards designation as an evergreen community that the local jurisdiction develop and implement a tree board or a tree department. So staffing potential could have some significant resource requirements associated with it. Depends on, I think, on the plan and the design and how the program is put together locally. Implementation would also involve coordination with all departments in the county that manage county-owned land and could potentially include new code and data collection requirements. And you can see an estimated 7 FTEs for program manager and for maintenance and operational field staff to maintain trees and conduct analysis and inventories. Next slide, please. A quick look at the public participation so far. We had a 30-day public comment period in March. We received at that time over 230 public comments. I believe I heard yesterday that those comments have continued to roll in anticipation of the Planning Commission process, that the comments I think are well over 300 at this point. Most of the comments have been strongly in support of additional tree canopy. We do have some comments from the building industry that indicate some concern that we already have tree canopy requirements, and they're actually doing quite well according to the monitoring report. Let's see. And the comments have also been made regarding perceived implementation of existing requirements and the enforcement of the required standards. But by far, there is strong support for urban tree canopy policies. Next slide, please. Here are a couple of examples of how the public comments have influenced the language directly in the policies. To acknowledge cultural value of trees and forested areas, recognize the existing programs that support this tree initiative. We already have a number of vegetation retention requirements, as I mentioned, in our critical area requirements for riparian and river, lake, and marine buffers, vegetation on steep slopes, etc. Policy language was adjusted also to clarify the purpose and the use of the monitoring results and to better align other environmental policies related to minimizing toxic chemical use as a management tool. Next slide, please. And as we were speaking about before we started this presentation, even though trees provide a significant environmental benefit, there are nonetheless some concerns raised about tree retention in urban areas. Most people love the trees, but they're not without some risk or elements of potential incompatibility. We still need to consider urban density and affordable housing within the urban growth areas, as well as other concerns such as wind throw, wildfire risk, solar access for rooftop solar panels, views, utility and property boundary issues where trees interfere, roof damage, root damage to sidewalks and roads, and long-term maintenance issues of forested properties. So it's not without some concerns, and we have to achieve a balance somehow between these types of concerns and public safety, as well as the economic and social services and environmental services that trees provide. Next slide, please. And the next steps, we will review comments received tonight and determine if further amendments are needed. Any questions that I can't answer this evening, we will respond to via email. There will be a summary of all of the comp plan element briefings from April through August in September of this year, with public hearings expected to begin in October on the comprehensive plan policy updates. Next slide, please. And any questions?
Thank you very much, Terry. Any questions? Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Terry. That was a very good presentation, and I think that there'd be an awful lot of support for this, myself included. One issue that has kind of dogged me a little bit, and I was looking at the Canopy supplement 9C4, and I'm on the architectural committee for my neighborhood, and it's actually the one that's kind of behind me. There's a in my screen, and a lot of larger trees and a lot of kind of dense development around it. And increasingly, as these older trees we really value, I have one close to me too. It's a hemlock, which has its issues, but I've got a great neighbor, and we are able to work together to keep it trimmed and properly taken care of. But there are neighbors that are not able to do that. And there's nothing that makes a bad neighbor like a bad tree. You probably know that better than I. Yeah. And, there is a little bit of what feels like inequity in that, particularly on these larger trees, if you have an old growth tree, which is just right in the target of what you want to save, it's consuming a lot of CO2, but it's got branches that are 30 feet in the air, extended well over a property line, in a development that is compact, that doesn't allow for any equipment. So if it's over your property line, it's really your responsibility to take care of it, but you really have no mechanism to do that. So if you don't have a friendly neighbor, you're kind of stuck. And I think it's a problem for a couple of reasons. Obviously for the homeowner, it's a problem that has this encroachment, but it's also a problem, I think, for how people might support, the county's approach to managing trees. So this, 9C4 really kind of caught my attention, and I saw that, well, maybe we're looking at adjustments for solar. And I don't know if you can speak to what adjustments, if there's any adjustments that might be being made. It speaks a little bit to roots and overgrowth and all that. Are there any, can you add any granularity to what is being done there? I mean, what are there, as a property owner, if you are, let's say I want to put up solar panels, or if I have these branches coming in, will I have any more rights? Is there anything specific that's being contemplated?
It's pretty hard to resolve those types of issues where a tree extends onto another person's property, because the civil law has been established that the branches or whatever intrudes onto the adjacent property can be managed by that adjacent property owner. So those branches could be that protrude onto the other property could be removed by that property owner. Not ideal for the tree necessarily. It's a pretty complex issue, and I'm not quite sure how, if there's any kind of one size fits all solution for dealing with that type of thing. The very same thing happens when there's a tree adjacent to somebody else's driveway and the roots start heaving the pavement. Or, it's a maple tree and it's filling up somebody's gutters with leaves, etc. It's a complicated issue, and I honestly, I don't have a solution for how to best manage that situation.
Okay, so the commentary, that I'm seeing there looks as if there might be some adjustments made if I did put up solar panels, or if somebody wanted to, was having a property line issue, with the trees. So there's nothing new that we can cite that would be coming along with this 9C4.
Nothing at the policy level. And I'm not sure how some of those issues have been resolved in the past. I know there are some setback requirements that have been proposed for new development on adjacent properties, but that's essentially or potentially, I should say, a property rights issue that, I own this property, I should be able to make use of it from one property line to the other, regardless of whether there's a tree on my neighbor's property. If I need to install a drainage facility along my property line and it cuts through the roots of an adjacent tree and causes damage to that tree, I'm still within my rights to dig that ditch or to install that drainage facility. So it's still pretty much up in the air, and it's typically resolved currently through civil agreements and sometimes in civil court, and sometimes it's just neighbor with neighbor, and occasionally the county gets asked to help resolve those issues. But because they're on private property, the county is very hesitant to step in to cases like that, except for in the case of potentially hazardous trees that are unhealthy. And if they're located in an area where the county has required them to remain, such as a native growth protection area or a critical area protection area. But even if an unhealthy tree is within striking range of a structure, and someone notices that it's unhealthy and is asked to have it removed, then the tree typically gets removed. So, I don't have a good answer for you. In many cases, this is a big issue, and it comes up not infrequently. But as far as county, regulatory authority or policy, I don't think we have anything that directly addresses that.
Okay, thank you. I have been noticing that more and more it seems to be coming up. So, but thank you.
It comes up a lot.
Thank you, Commissioner Pedersen, for those observations. Commissioner Campbell, Commissioner James, and then Commissioner Sheldon.
Yeah, there is a hazardous tree bulletin that PDS is putting out that is helpful for some guidance on this. I wanted to ask about the 38% and what qualifies as kind of the urban area. Like, I assume it's all unincorporated urban areas within the county. That's what urban is defined as.
Yes, it's unincorporated urban growth areas. So the urban growth boundaries provide the boundaries, and then the urban growth areas themselves and the city boundaries. So this is all outside of cities and only an unincorporated urban.
And so the 38% came from a more detailed analysis using satellite imagery of what would be a reasonable goal for maintaining tree canopy, correct?
Right. It's currently, it appears to be using the most recent data and some pretty sophisticated remote sensing techniques out of our surface water management division. 38% looks like a baseline for 2022.
And there have been some suggestions, could we increase that? And so 2 points about that. One, would it not then make sense to have 38% to be a goal of the 20-year canopy coverage as one of the elements for the new developments? And secondly, with adjacent urban areas, maybe there's an ability to do some tree exchange, tree retention protections that would help increase that goal so that we're not just looking within, but we're looking at adjacent land. I forgot the name of what those lands can be if they're slated for potential urban development, but I think we ought to think not just within, but adjacent to, as a way of thinking about how do we continue to maintain a tree canopy and increase it for longer term protection.
Right. Well, and the one of the premise or the policies included in this proposal would want to include trees that we wouldn't have otherwise protected in our current regulations. So maintaining that 38% and increasing the potential area of where trees would be preserved, just save the tree for the tree's sake, as opposed to save it because it's in a critical area buffer or something like that. So we are looking for greater retention in these policies than what we're currently requiring in the code. And the code says a 30% threshold at this point.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying.
Commissioner James.
There we go. Thank you. Just point of clarification again, what are the top objectives again of the county in preserving tree canopy? I know there are several, carbon sequestration, one, and
Right.
quality of life, and we all love trees. I love trees and that, but what are the county's stated like top couple reasons for preserving it?
Well, there's carbon sequestration, and then there's temperature moderation.
Oh,
Urban heat island effect. The trees help to moderate the heat island effect of urban areas where there's a lot of pavement. And temperatures in downtown Seattle tend to be higher than in the suburbs, largely because of the percentage of impervious surface. So trees help offset the impervious surface impacts and the heat island effect.
Sorry to interrupt, Terry, but the trees in the UGA help moderate the city heat.
The heat island effect in the urban areas, yes.
So it does. So
Mhm.
around Seattle, getting out of Seattle's heat, a lot of
Right. Well, yeah, it's going to be the
get those
trees in
outside of
Seattle
the
help
area
that
we're
heat
talking
island.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a local phenomenon. So a tree in a neighborhood is going to help moderate the temperature in that neighborhood.
Yeah, that's I just was wondering about the comparison between city heat and what we're talking about. It seems like they're a little bit separate, but I mean, I can imagine that it does help. It doesn't hurt.
Seattle is also proposing some significant changes in their canopy
Yeah.
coverage requirements for the same
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah, and that would be great for
Mhm.
the cities to do that. And I also looked at what the heck is it called again? There's tree equity score. Are you familiar with that?
I have not researched that, but I know the regional open space plan has some equity analysis that they've done related to access to open space and native vegetation and forested areas and things like that. So
Yeah,
I can understand
treeequityscore.org, if anybody wants to look it up, is really useful and very easy to navigate. You can pop in your city name, but it's for urban areas, cities,
Mhm.
what your city score is. And Everett and Marysville are doing actually really well on that front. And then American Forests .org is another resource I found that is very, very enlightening and educational. Good. So I just wanted to make sure I knew what our objectives were, and it seemed like there was a little bit. I think Commissioner Campbell alluded to that. What is the definition of what we're looking at? Are we looking at the cities? We're looking at the urban growth area. We're looking at rural area, and you've defined now that is the UGA area that is outside of the cities is what we're talking about.
Right. That's the area that we would have regulatory authority for.
Yeah. And of course, cities could always do a better job, but we're talking about policy for the UGA and just trying to keep it on, in my mind, straight that's what we're talking about, not city policies.
Right.
And 38% is kind of where we're at, even with a goal of 30. That's nice to see. Don't see that very often in government where you exceed your goals. So that was great. And I like the carbon sequestration part of what we're talking about. I also, the question kind of popped up in my mind, what else is good to help with that? And I came across certain grasses and plants that are actually as good or better than trees in some instances in carbon sequestration. So again, having to do with the goals of tree canopy. Tree canopy does those things, but it's not the only thing that does those things. So,
Right.
yeah.
And
yeah.
and another component of tree retention is that retention of native vegetation is also considered to be a principle of low impact development in terms of stormwater attenuation. If you have a large tree, there's a lot of rain that never hits the ground.
Yeah.
So it never gets into the ditch and it never flows into a local waterway. So the more vegetation you have, the less stormwater you have to manage. And if forecasts hold true for future rain events associated with climate change, the trees might provide a significant amount of help in managing, flash flooding and flashy storm events. Also reduces erosion and the amount of sediments that collect in the storm water, because obviously, as I mentioned, the water doesn't hit the ground, so it's not running off. So that's really another factor that we're considering as part of the tree retention. But it's also, there's a substantial amount of research done on human health and physical health and mental health with access to nature. And access to trees and greenery. It's hugely beneficial, and it's been documented in multiple, medical research documents. So there's a lot of really good reasons to save trees.
We love our Northwest. We love to go hiking, like my background, Mount Baker.
I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So
most of the photographs in the slideshows were my backyard.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Commissioner Sheldon.
I think he answered my one question, but the policies on the unincorporated, the incorporated areas, do they have policies for the tree canopy policies?
For where?
For any of the other incorporated places, Everett, Marysville, Stanwood, Linwood.
I don't know that. Hillary may have information on that as the project manager, but I haven't been diving into this deeply to see what other jurisdictions have done.
Yeah, but as these people grow, this is I'm looking for information, so you educate me on as they incorporated into the county areas, they wouldn't have to go by the county's regulations of the tree policies, correct?
That's correct. Unless there are specific call outs made in the interlocal agreements for what the cities would continue to support from pre-development standards.
Would that process be here, or would it be from the council reaching to the other councils to reach out to make a big change and go forward with something like this?
I think in the countywide planning policies, there is opportunity and directives for coordination between the county and the cities, and to incorporate much of the environmental protections into the interlocal agreements. But I don't recall if that is specifically called out in these policies. And if it's not there, it could be some language around negotiating with cities to potentially preserve the trees in perpetuity given potential for annexation.
Yes, I mean, but it's important that we go that process to be able to, so we don't turn ourselves into the bigger cities. Just one question, one left. I think I saw on your, you said that the hearing's going to be the 25th or 26th in October. Is that because it says nothing on the calendar?
That was my understanding. I think the 25th and the 27th. I don't know if there was something slated for all 3 nights, the 26, 20, 25, 6, and 7. Maybe someone else knows better about that schedule. I'm not sure if it's slated for 2 nights, the 25th and 27th, or if it's for all 3. Taylor, do you know?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that?
We're looking at the potential hearing schedule out in October.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the slide said the 25th and the 27th. What about the
I am-
26th? Was that also being considered for hearing?
I believe so. Let me pull up the schedule real quick just to double check.
Okay, thank you.
I hate to be a pain in the butt, but
You are never.
I just wanted to make, because it doesn't say on there. If it is going to be there, I'd like to be able to
Right,
know.
no, we appreciate your questions and getting the clarity so that everyone can mark their calendar and save those dates for the
Yeah.
hearings.
So I can have more caffeine before it starts.
There you go.
Thank you.
So right now we are looking at, so just a kind of big picture, September, we have the 2 meetings on the 12th and the 26th. And then October is the 24th, 25th, and 26th. And then
That's different.
November is the 14th, 15th, and 16th.
Wow.
It'll be a pretty packed couple of months for everyone.
So I'm really glad you asked because the slide had the dates wrong. It's the 24th, 5th, and 6th in October, Taylor.
Yes.
Okay.
And they
So
don't
we'll-
have the exact topics on those. It's just I know that October is the hearings and November is deliberations.
So we would like the general public to know, correct? So they have input.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Terry.
Oh, thank you.
That was a very pertinent conversation. It was very much appreciated. Director McCleary?
Yeah, we don't have the exact schedule in which each element is going to be heard. The hearings are set for the 3 days in a row, the 24th, 25th, and 26th. It depends on how quickly you get through. So to be able to specifically say, where you'll be at on each day, it's kind of difficult for us to know. The 3 days is just an estimate that you'd be able to get through the hearing in 3 days.
Right, and that should include all of the elements that you being briefed on April through
That's right.
August. So
Correct.
it's the full gamut of the comp plan proposed amendments will be heard on those 3 nights.
So as we wait over time, clarity will come into view and then we'll know which of the hearings we want to go to for the public. Commissioner Sievers.
So not a date related question. Sorry, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I hope I'm not cutting anyone off. Terry, as we talk through this, of course, trees and greenery are attractive, but I'm just thinking about the anticipated 330,000 additional people into our county when we already have a housing crisis. Like we don't have enough as it is. So I think, I love math and science and it can be prescriptive, but I just wonder when we look at zoning and we look at like, how does the county marry these two things, like preserving and planting, but also density? Because with density, we either accept smaller footprints and higher, there's there's a myriad of things. And so I'm asking a really big question, but I'm just curious how staff is approaching that in planning.
Well, part of the total tree canopy that we are looking at expanding or retaining could potentially be on county managed property. as well as allowing the developers plenty of flexibility to accommodate tree canopy in their developments and still achieve the urban densities that the comp plan would indicate are preferred for their developments to achieve. So it really is a balancing act, and there has to be some trade-offs, because you can't, you can have both, but only to a certain extent, right? So we need to, carefully manage what the urban growth areas look like, what the allowed densities look like, and account for area and space necessary to meet our open space requirements, as well as, tree canopy and critical areas and shoreline protection, et cetera. So all of those initiatives all need to be balanced together. I'm not sure what that will look like, but we'll get more information when we look at the proposed land use maps, and I think they'll be coming up in a future briefing for you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions for Terry while she's here? Terry, I've got a thought that came to my mind when you showed the two photographs of a mature plat and then a clear-cut plat, and you mentioned there had been a landscape plan for that plat that was approved. It would really be fun. Maybe it wouldn't be that particular plat, but it would be interesting to look at those three stages of a development so that the last photograph would show that development 20 years after it was approved and built out.
That particular development's still in progress, so I don't have a finished photo, but I do have some other photos of plats from before, during, and after that you can see.
The 20-year.
I don't have the 20-year yet, because
Well,
we're
there might
only
be some
really
out
out
there.
at almost year 10 on our regulations.
Oh, okay. There might be some 20s out there just by coincidence, although they'd be hard to find. It sure would be fun to see it.
Yeah, it'd be trickier to get the midway photographs from a 20-year-old plat. It would be sort of just by luck of the draw that an aerial photo might have them.
Right.
But we could
Okay.
certainly, I could send you some photographs of my collection of before, during, and after that are more recent. So you're not going to see the 20-year canopy, but you can get an idea of what they look like.
Okay. It's kind of what we're looking for, that and beyond.
Right.
Commissioner James, please.
Yeah, I had that same question too, Bob, but I just neglected to ask it. So I'm glad that you did. And I'm wondering, how many homes were destined to be on that plat that you showed us before and during?
I think it's somewhere between 10 and 12.
So that would be the way that we could see a 20-year. It's easy to find plats that are 20 years old that have 10 to 12 homes, right? They're all over the place. And see,
Right.
I
But
mean,
they
just
didn't
to
have
see
this.
what
Yeah, they
people
didn't.
have been doing. And that would be nice to see. Here's the after, people who live in these places and they want to see trees around their home and have shade and all those things too. So
Right.
Yeah, I
But a
agree. We need to
number-
have that wrapped up. It's like you showed us the
Mhm.
two, extremes before and then wipe it clean, but we don't know what it looks like. So it's where we don't have all the information. without
Right,
the
but
clear picture.
any 20-year-old plat that we would look at now was not subject to the same canopy requirements or landscape requirements that we have in place now.
Right.
But we could see what a development with 20-year-old vegetation growth looks like, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a straight up comparison between the regulations.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Terry? All righty, so that is our urban tree canopy policy briefing. And just for the public's information, all of us were talking about this before the meeting started. We were very impressed with how many comments we received prior to this briefing. And the process we follow now, this is with all formation of regulation and policy at the county level, is You're informed by professional staff through a briefing. And until that briefing occurs, you really need to come up to speed on the details of some of these policies. It helps us understand it better. And we're really happy to share that with those of you who are interested. And then the next step is the public hearing. And the beauty of a public hearing is this is the public's chance to speak to us. And we reserve our final deliberations and decisions until after we've heard from the public. And that's what's important about October. As the public announcements come up, the public hearing announcements, those of you who are following this, remember, timing is a big deal in government, and the timing of the public hearing allows you to come and speak to us. We very much look forward to that. We want to hear what you say. And after the public hearing closes, then that ends that input, and then we deliberate and we recommend on to the county council what policies should look like. Generally, they come from staff and we might tweak it, but the process is pretty clear and pretty transparent. So this is briefing, next is public hearing. We want to hear from you then we'll deliberate and we'll pass on our recommendations to the county council, just so you know how that process flows. Right now, starting October 26th, the hearings will start. And as we move forward to that date, we'll get a better clarification of which of the deliberations and public hearings we'll hear in order. And that's your chance to step up and please join our public hearings. And I thank you for your input.